This is the story of how a single father found faith again, through the heart of a woman who came to his door in torn clothes, holding the tiny hand of her little boy. A story of compassion, of faith, and of the unseen beauty that lives within us all. It was a quiet Sunday morning. The sun rose softly over a small town, painting everything in shades of gold. Inside a modest little house, a man named Jake was making pancakes for his son, Ethan. The sound of sizzling butter filled the air, and the smell of warmth and simplicity lingered. Jake was a single dad, strong, steady, and patient. But behind his tired eyes was a quiet ache. He loved his son more than anything, but the weight of being both father and mother sometimes pressed heavily on his shoulders. He often wondered if he was doing enough, if his life, filled with endless routines, held a deeper meaning. He worked hard, prayed occasionally, and smiled for Ethan, yet his soul longed for something he couldn't name. And then, on that very morning, life decided to answer that longing. There was a knock at the door. Gentle, hesitant, as if asking permission to be heard. Jake wiped his hands and walked over. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing there was a woman, her clothes worn and torn, her hair slightly tangled, her face pale with exhaustion. Beside her stood a little boy, no older than Ethan, clutching a tiny toy truck in his hand. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I'm sorry to disturb you, my name is Mara, and this is my son, Levi. We've just arrived in town. We don't have anywhere to stay tonight. I'm not asking for much, maybe just some water for my boy." Jake looked at her for a long moment. The world seemed to pause. He noticed the way she held her child's hand, tightly, protectively, and the quiet dignity in her tired eyes. His mind filled with thoughts, the bills, the groceries, the uncertainty, but his heart whispered softly, "Help her." So he nodded. "Please, come in." Mara hesitated, but stepped inside. The warmth of the small kitchen wrapped around her. Jake poured water for Levi and watched as the little boy's eyes brightened when Ethan offered him a pancake. For a few moments, there was silence, the kind that isn't uncomfortable, but sacred. Then Jake said quietly, "You can stay for breakfast if you'd like." Mara's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She nodded, whispering, "Thank you." In that simple act, of opening a door, something shifted. Two families, both broken in different ways, began to heal each other. Over the next few days, Mara and Levi stayed with Jake and Ethan. She helped around the house, cleaned the dishes, and told stories to the boys at night. Levi and Ethan became inseparable, laughing, playing, dreaming as if they'd known each other forever. But Jake couldn't help noticing the quiet strength in Mara. Despite everything she'd lost, she never complained. Despite her torn clothes, she walked with grace. Despite her pain, she smiled with faith. One evening, as she tucked Levi into bed, Jake overheard her whispering softly, "God, thank you for another day, even in this small home, I feel your light." And Jake felt something inside him stir. He realized that Mara wasn't just surviving, she was believing. A few days later, they went to the park. The boys ran across the grass while Jake and Mara sat on a wooden bench beneath a tree. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, bathing them in gold. Jake turned to her and asked, "Mara, after everything you've been through, what keeps you going?" She smiled faintly and said, "Hope. I've lost things, but not faith. Hope isn't found in comfort, it's found when you're standing in the rain and still believe the sun will rise. That's where peace begins." Jake looked away, trying to hold back his emotion. Her words sank deep into his heart. He realized that he'd been chasing control, perfection, security, all the while missing the stillness of faith. He had built walls to protect his heart, but those walls also kept out light. That day, as the boys laughed and the wind whispered through the trees, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years, peace. That night, as he lay in bed, he whispered a quiet prayer. "God, I don't know what you're trying to teach me, but please, help me listen." In the silence that followed, he felt warmth, not outside, but within. A small voice inside him said, "Let go, trust, open your heart," and he did. The next morning, when Mara mentioned that Levi didn't have any school supplies, Jake smiled and said, "We'll take care of that." He took the boys to a small store in town, and they picked notebooks, pencils, crayons, and a bright red backpack. When Levi hugged that backpack to his chest, tears filled Mara's eyes. She whispered, "Thank you, Jake. Not just for this, but for seeing us. Jake smiled. You remind me what faith looks like. And from that day forward, their home changed. Not in size, not in wealth, but in spirit. Mornings became sacred. Jake started rising early, not to rush, but to breathe. He would watch the sunrise, close his eyes, and whisper, "Thank you." Ethan and Levi's laughter filled the house like music. Mara began sewing clothes again, patching old fabric into new beauty. Jake would sit nearby, sometimes helping her thread the needle, sometimes just listening to the peace that settled between them. The house wasn't perfect, but it was alive with faith. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Levi looked up and said, "Daddy Jake, can I draw you something?" He ran inside and came back with a crayon drawing, a big red heart. Inside the heart were 4 stick figures: Jake, Ethan, Mara, and Levi. Levi grinned proudly. "That's our family heart." Jake looked at Mara, who smiled softly. Ethan leaned on his shoulder. In that moment, Jake realized something profound. Family isn't just who you're born with, it's who you love, who you lift, who you share faith with. And in the woman who once stood at his door in torn clothes, he saw something far beyond appearances. He saw the most beautiful heart. Days turned into weeks. Mara found a part-time job at a local shop. Jake continued working, but his heart was lighter now. He had stopped running after perfection and started walking in gratitude. He noticed how the boys prayed before meals, how Mara's laughter filled the house, how the evenings were no longer lonely. He noticed how peace isn't the absence of struggle, it's the presence of love. And sometimes, late at night, he would whisper to God, "Thank you for sending me a reminder of what really matters. Thank you for showing me beauty where I once saw brokenness." But life, as always, tests faith. One day, Jake's boss informed him that the company was cutting staff, and Jake's position was one of those to go. He drove home in silence, fear gripping his chest. How would he provide? What would he tell Ethan? What about Mara and Levi? When he walked in, Mara noticed the sadness in his eyes. She asked gently, "What happened?" He sighed, "I lost my job today." Mara took his hand and said softly, "Then maybe it's time to see where faith leads next." Her calmness surprised him. She continued, "You once opened your home to a stranger with nothing. Don't you think that same grace will open a door for you?" Jake smiled faintly. "You really believe that, don't you?" She nodded. "I have too. Faith isn't about what we see, it's about what we trust even in the dark." And that night, as the stars shone above their little house, Jake prayed again, this time not for a job, but for peace. A week later, he received a call from a community center nearby. They had heard of his kindness, how he helped a woman and her son when they had nowhere to go. They were looking for someone to manage their outreach programs, helping families in need. Jake accepted, his heart overflowing with gratitude. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. He realized that sometimes, when we lose something, it's only to make room for something higher. Months passed, seasons changed. The small home remained humble but filled with joy. Mara and Jake often talked about how life had brought them together, not by accident, but by divine design. Their stories intertwined, teaching both of them that miracles don't always come in shining robes, sometimes, they come in torn clothes, holding the hand of a little child. One evening, as the 4 of them walked through the park where they'd first talked about hope, Mara turned to Jake and said, "You know, I used to think I came to your door because I needed help. But now I realize, maybe God sent me because you needed healing too." Jake looked at her, eyes glistening. "Maybe we healed each other." They watched their boys run ahead, laughing, their small hands reaching for the sky. The air felt holy, like love itself had taken a seat beside them. And so, this story isn't about charity or pity. It's about the divine truth that lives in all of us, that even in torn clothes, even in broken times, beauty can still shine. It's about the power of opening your heart to a stranger and finding your own soul reflected back. Because when we see beyond the surface, when we choose compassion over judgment, we touch something eternal. So if you ever feel lost or empty, remember Jake and Mara. Remember that faith doesn't need proof, only trust. That kindness doesn't need wealth, only willingness. That love doesn't need perfection, only presence. True peace is not found in what you own, but in what you see. When you look at someone and see not their torn clothes, but their beautiful heart, That's when you begin to live with divine eyes. Dash dash dash. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kind Tales. Let this story remind you that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can become the greatest miracle in someone's life, and maybe, in yours too. Until next time, keep faith alive, keep your heart open, and always remember, you are never alone on this journey of love and light.